but I will write like 15 minutes before, and I would have slept more perhaps, but yeah.
Yeah, it's always nice to have a bit of a lie-in in the morning, isn't it?
Mm,
Yeah, I
yeah,
wish I, I wish I could have that chance.
yeah, I need a lot of
Mhm.
sleep nowadays, I guess, because a lot
Mhm.
of things are going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So now I'm naming the Plateau. Oh, yes. Mhm. Let me check that it works.
Live streamed.
Yeah, now I'm waiting for it to start. Yeah, here
Mm-hmm.
we are. We are on Facebook. So I hope everybody will watch it at some
Mm-hmm.
point. Not sure anybody is right now, though. Anyway, it will not be an interview as I usually do, but rather a talk that people can overhear, like a talk in a teacher's room, which you can overhear as you pass by and sneak a peek in it. And as Olya, the topic that you suggested is the Plateau stage. So, have you come across a decent definition, or maybe you made it yourself? What is it?
Well, yeah, it's good question actually, and I think it's quite a relevant topic for many students and many learners as well, especially learners, um, who've been teaching, professional learners who've been learning English for quite a long time. I've seen a couple of, different definitions. Part of them are linguistics, which say basically suggest that, at some point in our learning, we all hit a plateau stage. And in language learning, we're talking somewhere around B2 level, B1, B2. And this there's a very broad definition. So lots of people say that, a plateau is partly psychological. It's how we feel about our learning and especially about our progress and about our motivation. And well, plateau is basically, it's getting stuck. The mere definition of a plateau stage is where basically you get to a point where you don't feel as though you're moving anywhere. You're not really progressing with the language. So you could suggest that, this is quite a definition from psychology, really. It's how you feel about it, yeah, rather than what's really happening. But I guess there could be, partly psychological reasons and partly realistic reasons. We all hit plateau stages in any stage of our lives, and in any, you know, it can not just be about language learning, it can be about other things.
Mm-hmm. Like what? Have you ever experienced anything like that, not
Hmm.
in your language learning, but
Well,
somewhere
yeah,
else?
I was thinking like what could be like a good example of a plateau stage which is not related to language learning. So, well, and I basically the way I defined it for myself is every time we learn a new skill, we get better and better. We are so interested in learning something new. There is a point where you hit this, middle ground somewhere. After a couple of years of doing this skill, like in my case, for example, is jewelry making. It's my hobby. I've been doing it for about 7 years now. On and
Mm-hmm.
off. I've had two kids meanwhile, so it's hard to tell
Yeah, by the
when
way, was it
doing it.
kind of a coping strategy for you? I mean,
Yeah, you know what? It definitely helps you with, relieve your stress and get some sanity. But that's beside the point. I've noticed that in my skill learning, I got to a point where I've tried all the techniques, I've learned all the basics, I have developed more or less my own voice. in this. And then there is a point where you kind of think, where next? You know, there is this quite a prominent sense of lack of direction.
Mm-hmm.
It,
Are there people, I believe there are people who don't care. I mean, I was thinking like, why so much buzz? Like there are
mm,
stages like this, stages like that. You can even stay there and keep this level of whatever skill we are
yeah.
talking about. Like why everybody whom I listened to, I mean some YouTube speakers, whoever, they start with the ways to get out of this, to
Mm,
overcome this, to manage this, to get beyond that, to go somewhere else, get better, whatever. Nobody thinks, nobody talks at least about an option, just being there and enjoying what you've achieved so far. Mm,
absolutely, absolutely. There can be a very comfortable stage where you can actually do quite a lot already. So again, with we can all think of the level where we are quite comfortable with. You know, this it can be cooking, it could be your hobby, it could be sport, it could be dancing or anything like that. Obviously, yes, of course. I think it's a very good point that actually, instead of just thinking how to get out of the plateau stage, the question could be, what would I like to do with this? And my answer might not necessarily be I want to get out of it, because that obviously will require a lot of effort and, you know, rethinking of how we learn a language. But absolutely, you might think, I already have a lot and I can get by in so many situations. So let's celebrate that.
That's what I'm doing with my German. I believe
Mm,
I still cannot sound like really, really proficient, or
yeah.
like someone might look down at me, but I can
Mm,
get by in most situations that I encounter. And most importantly, I've started enjoying the language and the interaction, not only the learning part, because yes, I started enjoying the learning part much earlier, although not from the very beginning. With German and didn't happen like that, but still I believe I'm really happy with it now. I mean the relations, if we imagine us, me and German as people, we are quite happy together.
mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm.
I absolutely
It's quite a steady relationship. It's you past the first romantic
joyful.
stage.
Like it's not even about the level or sustainability of the relationship. It's about the joy that I'm having here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Although it
Mm-hmm.
looks like it is this plateau stage, so it
Mm-hmm.
can be
Mm-hmm.
enjoyable. My
Yeah,
point.
yeah, it can be pretty enjoyable. I was just thinking, um, you know, when you say that I'm in a relationship with my skills and I'm actually quite happy with what's going on, and I think, you know, it gave me an idea that we're very stable at this level. There's very little we can forget.
Mhm.
There's very little we can lose. So this is quite solid. You know, the plateau stage, it does feel like firm ground under your feet. So that's good news for us. Yeah. So there's very little we can lose at this stage. So yeah,
Mhm.
for so many people, it becomes a place where they stagnate, or it becomes a place where they enjoy the stability, or
Mhm.
it's the place where, you know, after a certain time, you might think, okay, where next? All
Mhm.
these routes are
It's
available.
quite a nice place.
Yeah,
Actually,
yeah, it is quite
feels like a place to get some rest, to celebrate your
absolutely.
achievements. But
Well,
as long
yeah.
as you decide to go further, like what could help? And for us as teachers, what could we do? What do you do with those who struggle, who kind of not happy? Maybe they are perfectionists, just they
Hmm.
don't really need it, but they want it just because they have always done their best and achieved what they could, like
Yeah.
the highest part, the highest level. So the methodology, what do the renowned methodologists say about that? And
What do we do? Well, basically, well, there is some literature on that. Obviously, you can, I think it feels very different when you are a teacher teaching someone who is frustrated about their level. And it also feels very different when you are that person who would like to get to a different stage, right? So I think there's a very two different things. And obviously, I was wondering if what we could discuss together, whether we could maybe start with some definitions of what exactly Plateau is, from sort of the skills point of view, from the language point of view. Because of course we can say, as a learner, you feel you're not making any progress. That's fine, but why is it so? So what exactly is happening? Yeah, so in my blog, I've written, a couple of blog entries describing different prominent features of the plateau. And if we could maybe together, just for our audience as well, we could just,
List. Mm-hmm.
list them briefly, right? So basically, there are five features. I'm using the definition of Jack Richards, the professor who wrote about Plato. And the first one is that the first feature that learners can notice about their language is that there is a gap between the productive and receptive language. So at this point, we know that there is English I produce and English I understand. And at a plateau, well, at the lower levels, it's more or less the same, isn't it? So I understand very little and I can produce very little. And I feel as though I'm progressing very fast because I didn't, yesterday I didn't know these two words and now I know these two words. That does feel like a huge achievement, right? So it's the receptive and productive levels, they're more or less the same. As you can get to more or less, intermediate, upper intermediate, you can see that there is a huge disbalance between how much you understand. Lots of students, I'm sure you've had this in your practice and your teaching, say, I understand everything.
Mm-hmm. Cannot say anything.
I
Mm-hmm.
cannot say anything.
Which is
So,
not true. They
which
can
is not
a
true.
lot.
Yes, exactly. But this is a very subjective feeling, isn't it? So it's a very subjective frustration, which is there. But the frustration is quite real
Mm-hmm.
because I think at this stage, lots of learners imagine or they think they should be producing more.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
As if
Exactly. Yeah, they assume as long as they understand it, it can be possible. It must be possible for them. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which is fair enough because lots of linguists, many famous linguists actually thought that this is enough. When you learn a language, there was this hypothesis which is basically about, just do more,
Mm-hmm.
read more, listen more, and naturally your production will catch up. But now
Mm-hmm.
we know that basically this is simply not true because you can be very, very proficient and understanding, but if you don't practice, your production is basically stays quite low, right? So it's quite
Mm-hmm.
a revelation for lots of learners is that actually if you want to speak, you need to speak. If you want to write, you need to write. It doesn't matter how much you read or how much you listen. So it might just give you some ideas, some, accidental learning. You can pick up a couple of words, but that does not really solve the problem of the productive.
Mm-hmm. The focus must be shifted now. And
Yeah.
well, we have quite a passive vocabulary by then. So the point is not enlarging that, but making it work for you, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Well, so that was the first one we talked about. The second one is quite a nuisance for lots of learners. Lots of people get frustrated by that. This is the errors that we keep making again and again and again. So we know as teachers, you probably know that you've done it many times when you get an essay which is quite proficient and you still correct the
Mm-hmm.
third person S, the basic articles or little bits and pieces that are not really the
Mm-hmm.
B2 level. So they're pretty basic mistakes. Yeah, so we
Yeah, everybody has it. Something. Some of my students have this I very like.
yeah,
The others have I am agree, and so on.
yeah,
And
I am agree with you. Like I said, teachers have those as well. So it's a funny thing. From I was wondering what kind of mistakes do people make, whether that depends on your, on your the first language. Is there an impact of your first language?
I believe there is. Yeah.
There's definitely that. This could also be your personal ways of thinking. Some people make mistakes in their native language, so that is, there
Mm-hmm.
would be that as
Oh
well.
yeah, yeah. This horrible звонит and so on.
Yeah, which is funny. Because if you think about the mistakes that are ingrained in the society, even if you speak the language, you still might be making mistakes, even though you've heard the correct pronunciation many
Mm-hmm.
times, even though you've seen the correct spelling many times, and you still might be making that mistake.
Stays
Interesting.
with you. Yeah, fossilized errors are really tricky to
Yeah.
correct. I would rather just offer a new way to express the same thought, the same idea.
Mm, mm,
Like,
mm, mm.
I agree with you. Like, I have the same opinion. I would go along with you. Like, I tend to
Yeah,
offer them other options that they might like because it's new and it feels like progress and it feels
yeah,
like, wow, there is something more, and I can use that and sound even
yeah.
fancier. And so some of my students pick those up and just don't use this fossilized error structure anymore. With others, I try to find a way to correct it just bit by bit with some smaller steps and creative ways, like in changing very like for really like, which sounds more or less the same, and there is
Mhm.
still a word in between which they are used to. I am agree. Yeah, again, changing the verb. I would agree. Yeah,
Mhm,
need
mhm,
something
mhm.
there. Let it be the correct
Or
one.
yeah, well, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think it's a really good idea to offer them, to offer students different options, something they can pick and choose. What I think, like in my practice, again, we try different things. I believe that in order to change something, you first need to notice it. Noticing is one of the very important skills in language learning. So when you notice something, you notice the example of your own speech, right? And when you are able to stop yourself and kind of really think about it, that's a good idea. So the first step is always identifying what exactly is it that I make mistakes with. When I worked with like younger people, we used to write those examples of my favorite mistakes on on a piece of cardboard and just sticking it somewhere in the bathroom. They can see it, that they see the correct one. They see the correct option, which it takes time. But that's the problem with fossilized terrorists, isn't it? So they are already there, and it's difficult to change something rather than learn something new. So it's
Mhm.
what you're saying, you're offering them an alternative,
Another one, just. Mhm.
which I think it totally makes sense, because it just gives you a different, way of saying something. Mm. And yeah, um, another thing that teachers could do with fossilized errors, if you're teaching one-to-one, like physically, if you're physically present, um, sometimes there are, you can use a signaling, a signal, a toy,
Mhm.
a sign that says Sydney snake. Yeah. So you can be
Mhm.
quite creative about what you can show to your student. Sometimes if you're teaching one-to-one online, sometimes we use emoji on the screen,
Mhm.
which basically says, oh, there's been a signal. So what have I done? So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Wow, 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 wow. That's what I do
yeah,
sometimes.
when we both understand, when me and my student both understand that this is what we're working on, I have to correct you and I have to use hot correction. I'm sorry. It has to be discussed because usually we, as teachers, we don't use hot correction, right? We're
Mm-hmm.
communicative teachers. That basically means we don't want to cut people short when we communicate, right? We don't want to say, I'm sorry, I'm not listening to you. I don't know, I don't really care.
Mm-hmm. I'm listening to your
I'm
mistakes.
really listening to that mistake. It's not really nice. We don't want to give that impression. However, when we're working at the plateau stage, we explicitly discuss this. I will have to stop you every time you make this one of
Mm-hmm.
out of five. Yeah. So when I know my student, I will cut them short because but we agree to do that
Some
because
of them explicitly ask for that, and
they
they
do.
take
They do.
offense when they are not corrected, when not every mistake is corrected. I have these issues with my students quite often, like they expect me to correct everything. They want
Mhm,
to be
mhm, mhm,
stopped and corrected. Or if it is a chat, if it is something asynchronous,
mhm,
like
mhm,
now we are doing this course, like you are a student of as well, like this. Uh,
mhm, mhm.
Food and English at the
I
same
noticed
time.
that actually, yeah. So
Yeah,
there's
people
people are
ask for
really
that. They
worried.
expect
Mhm,
me to read all the multiple
mhm,
messages they send and proofread them and
mhm, mhm,
give them
mhm.
extensive and comprehensive, like,
Yeah.
perfect feedback, which I don't think really works for them.
Yeah, I just think it's not particularly effective, to be honest, because it really is, it's psychologically draining. People are, they're so preoccupied with the accuracy, sometimes they really want to be corrected. And I think it's partly, of course, it's cultural.
Yeah, yeah, we
Russian-speaking
are just
learners,
educated this way, like.
yeah, that's how you were taught, and I totally understand that's the way you were taught. This is what you think good teaching is about. However, there are many different approaches to error correction, and I think we need to discuss this. We need to educate students who would just expect one way of
Mhm.
correction. Obviously, there is different ways of correcting. There's hot correction on the spot. There's
Mhm.
delayed correction. I can do it in writing. You can do it yourself. I can actually signal something, and you can see this as a signal to stop. Yeah, it is a bit tricky. Yeah, and I think it's with fossilized errors, it doesn't have to be all the time. We if I know that that's the mistake the students makes quite often, is their favorite mistake, inverted commas, I might signal, but apart from that, I won't be stopping them every time they make any mistake because
Mhm.
it's not going to get them anywhere. Yeah, so it's
Absolutely not. So
right.
was it the second, the
It
third?
was the second, yes. So then if we move on and we discuss the next feature, which is uh you might recognize that in other skills as well. So your fluency has progressed at the expense of complexity. What does that basically mean? At this level, students are quite happy talking. They're quite fluent communicators. They're happy to chat. They're quite fluent. They pick up some clues, and they can take part in the group communication, in one-to-one communication. So they're quite confident at this level. However, the complexity of the language is quite low. What I mean is people still stay in the safe zone. I know that, we counselors, we don't like saying that somebody's in the safe zone, but that feels like that, doesn't it? So at this point, people quite often, students have their favorite ways of saying, they're quite comfortable using basic, present past tenses. Like Russian learners will never use any perfect tenses because
Mm-hmm.
they're not quite sure how to use it in the spontaneous speech, right? So they will be still playing safe in many ways. They will be playing safe with the use of adjectives. They quite often say, "Oh, it's very nice. It was a
Mm-hmm.
nice day. It was nice meal. Everything was very nice." So they won't actually go in. They won't try out new language because it's a bit dangerous, right? So they still play safe, right? And it's a tricky one, isn't it?
Yeah, because that's where many of them, hit their perfectionism on the other hand. So on one hand, they want to play it safe. On the other hand, they want to achieve more and they feel bad about themselves not using the whole plethora of synonyms that there are and so on. Well, they start second guessing themselves, like being unhappy about that. So the
Yeah.
process was fun, but then they start thinking, why didn't I do
Mm-hmm.
that?
Mm-hmm.
Why did I sound so, childlike,
Yeah, it's
5 year
interesting.
old English?
My student, I'm actually teaching someone at the moment, and she expressed exactly that. Is like, I'm happy talking, and I notice myself, using some simple words and simple structures. And I'm so frustrated at the same time because I would really like to be, using something more complex, but I can't, and I don't know where to start, and something like that. It can be very frustrating. So I think teachers can really help here, in, first of all, identifying, I think this is what's happening, right? And I don't know, Zhenya, what you use here, but I believe in lexical approach, and I believe
Mm-hmm.
in dogme. So people might
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
not know what that means, but basically, as we enter this level, we have to, reinvent our teaching approaches, because we can't really give spoon feed our students 5 vocabulary items, 1 grammar point per lesson, and then just kind of let them go happy, because that doesn't really work like that. So they need to change their thinking, really, because in at this level they can produce a lot already, and I think that should become the focus of the correction. So, for example, if a student produces some iterate, a piece of language, we write it down or we record the audio, and we actually see how we can make it more complex. So we work with what they can already produce. We don't really feed them anything new.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, I did something like that, maybe even vice versa, last
Mhm,
Monday, like this Monday, basically. So we
mhm,
had a text with the students who are B2 something.
mhm,
And before reading that text, I gave them kind of abstracts, phrases from that text where I changed the advanced vocabulary into a simpler vocabulary
mhm,
and ask them to think what else it could be. Like
mhm,
there was the phrase like the recent report claims blah blah blah.
mhm,
And I wrote the recent report says and
mhm,
asked them before reading the text to come up with some other verbs which could be used here
mhm,
and then, so it built up the suspense about like what's going on, what will we see next. So I told them that yes, we are going to read the text and you will see some more options there. But before, let's brainstorm what you already know. Let's activate what you have but don't use. And then
mhm,
we read it and they, that's what I thought, and that is different, and that's what's more, it can also work, mine works, and this works as well. So they ended up with kind of 3 to 4 synonyms for each situation.
Yeah, yeah. So what basically you relied on their prior knowledge. So
Mhm.
when when they sit down and they really think of what else it could be, they retrieve something from their memory, yeah, something that they don't use, and then they check themselves. So a lot of it is working with what they know already, and activation. So we're activating the vocabulary they already have. Lexical approach is about seeing all the language as chunks, as pre-prepared combinations of words that quite often come together. Yeah, so we at this level we really stop learning just random individual.
Individual words, yeah,
Yeah,
that makes
we
sense.
do not recommend that because that is the rule now. Yeah, so it really does work at lower levels, doesn't it? So it's
Yeah,
actually
that was my actually the next question after we go through
mm,
the list, because I feel like most of, if not everything,
yeah.
most of the techniques that we use here could work from the very beginning. Like, why don't we teach like that from the very beginning?
Well,
But
I think at the very beginning, there's very little people can rely on. There's very
mm,
little independent lexicon that they can use because they have to be spoon-fed a little bit when they're just starting, right? So
on
they
the other hand, with not so young learners, let's put it this way,
it's true
who
as
have had experience learning other languages and all those, tsiyon, like we know it in Russian, we know it in English. Uh,
Yeah, if a learner, obviously an adult learner, can rely on their previous learning, doesn't have to be languages, it can be learning anything new. So that's why we ask grown-ups to analyze, to reflect, to evaluate, to apply it, yeah, because they do have learning skills that the kids don't have. With kids, the
mhm,
methodology will be totally different. Whilst adults, of course, they have the broader view of the world, they have their life experiences they can rely on. Yeah, so adult learners have a lot they can use that will aid them in language learning. However, when we talk about, elementary level, it's okay to learn individual words. However, of course, you can learn phrases at an elementary level. Of course, you
I
can.
did as a
Yeah,
5-year-old. I was taught specific phrases, and I never realized they were like they consisted of specific individual words or
yeah,
structures. I knew, like, excuse me, is there a bus from here to my kindergarten number, blah blah blah. That's
that's
what my
nice.
father taught me. And
That's
so he
nice.
used this personalization. So he
Yeah,
taught me a
absolutely.
question I could have asked at some point. And speaking of young learners, I have noticed that my daughter, who is 6 now, she also has this noticing skill. So we've been
Hmm.
doing something about English with her, just a little bit. And then when she hears me say that word, or when as I'm teaching and she is present, she listens to us talking, and she notices, yeah, we had it. Oh, it's interesting, or it's, I don't know, fun, joy, whatever word she knows. And she said, that was the word. And
Mm.
she
That's
has it
great.
too.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, going back to fluencies as opposed to complexity, yes, we should rely on analysis more at this level, I think. We've talked about, different ways of doing it, how we can really focus on the student's input rather than on the textbook, and we work with the student's language to make it complex. We don't really, if you work in dogme, for example,
I
do
love
that.
it. Yeah.
So I don't know if we should explain that, how that works to the audience, because
Mm-hmm.
in a classical dogma, if you want to be a purist
No, I
dogmatist,
don't.
no, yeah, if you obviously we use elements of it, but it really helps us make the speech more complex. Obviously, yeah, that's what we do. We don't use any pre-prepared texts or language materials. We use a conversation as a tool to get the student to talk, to answer the questions, and to get that language out of them. Once we got the language out of them, we can, emergent language, we call it emergent language,
Mhm.
we can help them paraphrase or sit down with them and formulate together what they want to say. Yeah, so it really works with the next Plateau problem, which is like limited vocabulary range. Yeah, we're talking um, um, about situations where it's not, I don't have, when a student doesn't have enough vocabulary to express exactly what they want to express. Yeah, so they can do it very approximately sometimes. So they need more specific vocabulary to express what they want to say. And yeah, anything else you do with to help them with the complexity? Because that does require courage, doesn't it? You have to
Mm-hmm.
be brave to try.
Absolutely, yeah, that's what I do. Well, we analyze a lot and we try to rephrase it. w- Like once we've read something, and now the next time they say it the way they are used to saying, I
Mm-hmm.
tend to remind them of another version that we are actually familiar with already.
Mm-hmm.
So, to make it well, most of them don't really need these prompts because that's what they want. That's
Yeah.
sometimes I tell them not to bother that much as long as they can get their message across, but
Mm-hmm.
not to beautify the language too much.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them want it and they feel there is a gap and they are not completely themselves being so simple. But one of my students has made quite a wise observation. She mentioned this fact, this problem, but she gave it a twist. So if you can express your idea in the simple language you have, be it English, or she's also studying French, so it means that the idea itself is worth it, is valid, is solid. So, and if you can only express some ideas, some thoughts with all these, exquisite, complex structures that we tend to use in Russian, it might mean that you are hiding something not completely thought through. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Something that is not yet ready to be shared, not yet, cooked to the level it can be fed to your audience. You might hide behind all these beautiful structures and so on. So she kind of made her peace with her being like not as proficient as she is in Russian, and she uses it as a test uh,
Mm-hmm.
for her ideas, whether it is worth sharing at all or not.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about here is, um, it's sometimes when people make this exaggerated attempt to enrich their language to the point it becomes slightly fake.
Mm-hmm. Like
Uh,
ChatGPT, sometimes it does this way. I had such
mm,
a funny example when a friend of mine and another guy tried to apply for a Portuguese visa, I believe. It
mhm,
was a visa for what they call it, startuppers, innovators, like things like that.
mhm,
And they wrote a motivation letter which was just full of that exquisite, beautiful language. Every sentence had two or three metaphors, adjectives. It was all blooming with it. And I thought, like, no, guys, nobody will buy it. You are two IT guys. You never speak like that. Just
yeah.
edit it, like, make it half as beautiful.
Yeah, it's the question of genre, isn't it? It might not be, as you said, all
Not
this
authentic. No.
beautifying the language might not even be appropriate. If you're applying for a visa or applying for a job, you have to be more, you have to use a different genre of language. Another thing I noticed, Shane, about, about the group we're in, which is like English for, was kind of related to eating habits
Mhm.
and nutrition. I noticed that it makes it so much nicer when the information is presented in so-called plain English, right? So
Mhm.
it's a specific genre, which is like, I think, the opposite of bureaucratic English. The sentences are quite concise, short and clear. It's very clear to understand. It's easy to understand what the person's talking about. And I thought to myself, we invest so much sometimes in in our English to get, to learn all these fancy words, but there are many genres that actually don't require that. And I think being able to choose between the languages, genres is actually a very cool thing. So just a message to the students could be that yes, we do need to make, to use more complex language, but only when appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be more flexible in your choices. So it's
Yeah,
always,
that's about choices, options, right? That's what all learning is about. The more you
Mhm.
learn, the more options you have. That's what I guess I will tell my
Yeah,
child when she says like I don't says it already. I don't want to school. Like why should I?
yeah.
She's not
Welcome to the
even
club,
started,
Jamie.
but to have more options. Like she wants to be a hairdresser now. Why not? She will have more options if she studies, and so that's
Yeah, well then with language learning it's very similar. You can actually have choices here. You can adjust your language appropriately to the situation, and choose the genre that is um, that can be applied to the situation, and it would work best, you know. But again, in order to have a choice, you have to have it in your toolkit. You have to
mm-hmm,
be
mm-hmm,
aware that, and again, you mentioned ChatGPT, and the ChatGPT does give us an opportunity to play about with language, doesn't it? So I
mm-hmm.
think it's another topic, really. It's another big
Yeah,
topic
we could talk about it
in
someday.
education. But students can, I think it's great for students I think it raises the bar quite high, to be honest, with the
Mm-hmm,
introduction of GPT. Now, all the students have to learn that there are, different genres, there are registers, there are stuff,
mm-hmm.
and GPT can adapt to that. So,
Yeah, if you ask it explicitly, but
yeah, otherwise it produces a beautiful text that is not, it doesn't really sound
mhm.
natural, you
Just
know.
in case, yeah, just
Yeah,
in
yeah,
case you
just in
want it
case, guys,
to
just so you
sound
know.
like a
We need
Shakespeare.
like sounds like Shakespeare, but why? Because it misses the genre. And the students have to be aware of that. That's why I think the bar has been, it
Mhm.
raises the bar so high now that everybody nowadays need to know that in order to operate GPTs, I think.
Yeah, that's another huge topic. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I guess we've covered more or less everything I had on my agenda. So, is there anything you'd like to add? Is there anything that you also wanted to share, but we didn't?
Mm. Well, I think just to if we want to round up,
Mm-hmm.
the Plateau struggles, you know what? When I thought about it, I really think about, my feelings as a learner at the Plateau stage, and I know that all these feelings are true. All the feelings are very real. There is a lack of the lack of sense of direction. Yeah, there is some frustration. There is some sort of a motivation drop. There is a lack of, as if nothing's happening. There's a lack of novelty. Anything feels slightly boring, and it's okay to feel that way,
Mm-hmm.
almost, because it made me think about, a plateau. It's like being a teenager, isn't it? You're not quite grown up yet, but you're really not really, but
You
you're
don't
not
want
a
to be a
child.
child anymore.
You don't want to be a child anymore. You really want to move on, but you don't have the toolkit yet to enter the adulthood. And I can understand the conflict, and I understand the frustration of it. So, but again, teenage years, like anything, it's just a stage. Yeah. So
Mhm.
we I think we need to be mindful about what decisions we can make here, because is it possible to move up a level?
Mm,
Of course it is, yes, and it's um, but the thing is, you'll have to reconsider the ways you learn. You have to probably
mhm.
change how you learn, how you set goals, how you how your teacher corrects mistakes. So it kind of requires a lot of more skills, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
rather than
Yeah,
any
and
enthusiasm.
trust is
Trust.
paramount. So finding a teacher you can talk about your frustration with and ask them to do it this or that way and not be just, a subject. And
Absolutely.
I love the metaphor of a teenager because that is what I tend to tell every now and then. Like, your language is not bad. Like, people tend to say that, well, I have bad English, my English is bad,
Mm,
or weak or something. But I tell them, no, it's young. It's just young. And it's so much more beautiful and inspiring. So, and it is true if you just sum up the hours you've been talking English and make it a year or two, or will it be 5 years or so, if
mhm.
we just do it mathematically
Yeah.
and compare it to the years we've been talking our native language. So
Mhm.
our native language is more or less the same age as we are, like a couple years probably younger, but not more, while the foreign language is very young, and at some point it is a teenager.
Yeah, absolutely.
Shall we stop here? It's a beautiful.
Yes, well, Jenny, thank you so much for inviting me. That's actually was quite insightful for me just to hear how you approach the typical plateau problems, and that it sounds like you guys are doing quite a lot of really useful, meaningful, fun things together.
Mhm. Yeah, it was very interesting to talk. And the thing that I lack as a freelancer, yeah, this
Yeah.
professional communications.
Well,
So,
thank you so much for inviting me.
yeah, nice. It was nice having you. So now I will stop the stream and